The CEO sat alone in his office, staring at the city lights through the glass wall that reflected his empty heart. 2 years had passed since his wife Clara had died in a car accident, but her laughter still echoed in the corners of his memory. Everyone thought time had healed him, but the truth was, he had never opened her last box of belongings. It sat quietly in his library, untouched, gathering dust and memories he was too afraid to face. One rainy evening, while lightning danced outside and loneliness tightened its grip, he finally opened the box. Inside he found her favorite book, Pride and Prejudice. He smiled faintly, remembering how she used to read it by the fireplace, always teasing him for never understanding Mr. Darcy. As he flipped through the pages, a folded piece of paper slipped out and fell to the floor. It was an old letter, yellowed at the edges, sealed with Clara's handwriting. His hands trembled as he opened it. "If you're reading this, my love, it means I'm gone. But there's something you must know. Months before my accident, I met someone who reminded me of the person you used to be. Kind, humble, and full of purpose. Her name is Emily. She's a single mother working 2 jobs, and she's struggling more than anyone should. I wanted to help her, but she refused charity. She said she wanted to earn everything with her own hands. There's something special about her, something I can't explain. Maybe she's meant to remind you of the world outside your walls, the one you've forgotten. Please find her and help her in your own way. For me." The letter ended with a postscript, a name and an address written in Clara's graceful handwriting. He sat there frozen, his mind racing. Clara had never mentioned this woman. Why had she hidden the letter? And why did she sound so sure he needed to find her? The next morning, driven by a strange pull he couldn't explain, he followed the address. It led him to an old neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Narrow streets peeling paint and children playing barefoot in puddles. There he found a small bakery named Sweet Crumbs. Inside, a young woman stood behind the counter, her hands dusted with flour, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She smiled politely when he entered. "Good morning, sir. What can I get you?" Her voice was warm, but there was exhaustion in her eyes. He introduced himself, hesitating before mentioning Clara's name. The moment he did, her expression softened with surprise. "You knew Mrs. Clark?" she asked quietly. "She was my wife," he said, his voice cracking slightly. For a moment she just stood there, processing the words. Then she smiled sadly. "She was my angel. She used to come here every week, not to buy anything, but to talk. She'd sit right there by the window. I didn't have anyone else to listen. She told me about her husband, how work had swallowed him, how he'd forgotten to breathe outside the office." Her words pierced him like a blade. He remembered every time Clara had asked him to come home early, to spend a weekend away, to just live. He'd always said next time, but next time had never come. Emily continued softly. "She told me she hoped one day you'd see what she saw in people. She believed you still had that heart inside you." He stood there silently, fighting the weight of guilt pressing on his chest. The woman before him was struggling, yet she carried herself with grace and quiet strength, the very thing Clara had admired most. Over the following weeks, he found himself returning to the bakery. At first he told himself it was to honor Clara's wish, but soon it became something more. He'd help fix the broken oven, restock shelves, or just sit with Emily and her little daughter Lily, who had the brightest smile he'd seen in years. Lily would call him Mr. Tall and make him draw silly pictures while Emily laughed softly from behind the counter. For the first time since Clara's death, the sound of laughter didn't hurt. It healed. One evening, as they closed up the shop, Emily turned to him. "You know," she said gently, "you remind me of a man Mrs. Clark once described. Someone who used to believe that kindness could change people." He smiled faintly. "I used to be that man. Then I forgot." "You didn't forget," she replied. "You just lost your reason. Maybe you're finding it again." Her words lingered in his mind long after he drove home. He began to think about Clara differently. Not with grief, but with gratitude. Maybe this was her final gift, a chance to live again through compassion. Months passed and the bakery began to thrive. He used his resources quietly to help Emily expand the place, but she refused to let him do it for free. "If you want to help," she said, "be my partner, not my savior." He admired her pride, her strength, her refusal to let life break her. Together they built Sweet Crumbs into a local favorite, a warm corner of hope in a cold city. One night after closing, Emily found an old framed photo on the counter. It was a picture of Clara, smiling, holding a loaf of bread from the very first day they met. Underneath, he'd written, "She brought us together." Emily looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Do you think she knew this would happen?" He nodded softly. "Clara always knew things before I did." For the first time in years, his heart felt light. He realized that love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms. It flows through the people they've touched, guiding others toward the same light. As the bakery lights dimmed and the streets outside quieted, he stood at the window watching Emily and Lily laugh together. He thought about Clara's letter, about how her last words had led him not just to another person but back to himself. Life had a strange way of stitching broken hearts together. Clara had left this world, but her love had found a new shape, a new purpose. And so, the CEO who once buried himself in work now found peace not in power, but in the smell of fresh bread, in the laughter of a child, and in the quiet company of a woman who reminded him that even after loss, life still finds a way to bloom. Sometimes love doesn't end. It simply changes hands.